to me, this is like easy and exciting, but also this is like, it's a really big step from you to go from solo to a number of other replicas. The good news is it's been done many, 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 many times before you. One of the biggest steps that you can do is to go from like one person to 2 or 3 people, because you're like, ugh, like, extricating yourself and, what if they don't do it as well as me? And, I need to find someone exactly like me to do it exactly the same way. And why don't they think like me? And so there's a book, it's called The E-Myth Revisited. That is the journey of technician to manager to entrepreneur. And so you're the technician, but you're also the manager and you're also the entrepreneur. Right now, you're wearing all 3 hats. And the simple way of doing that is systems. And that's documenting what is the mission and the vision of the business. It's documenting what are the values of the business. It's documenting how do you greet someone when you walk in the door. It's documenting how do we actually deliver what we deliver. So it's delivered in that special Lani way for everyone. That's all stuff that it will seem impossible at times, but can be documented. It can be documented. And some of these are concepts that you will have to create in your business for how you want the team to deliver things. And I'll give you an example. So I was taught by my dad, who how to deliver and how to service customers, right? I was taught customer service from him. He taught me in his way and I embodied in my way, or how do I want to look after customers? But I was then tasked with, well, how do I communicate that to my team? How do I get my team on board with how I want to deliver to customers? I was taught some business training by some Scientologists, which was a very interesting experience. And one of the things that they taught was this concept called exchange in abundance, which is if you have an exchange with someone, how can you make sure that ideally that person feels like they got more than what they asked for? And so we started practicing that inside the business and teaching my team about it. But we came up with our own kind of like branded concept of that for our help desk team, which we call Service Plus One. And that's like, it's really obvious for our team. And you're welcome to steal that if you want. But internally, we call it Service Plus One. Anytime, when we have our team meetings and we're doing our little culture things, and it's like, let's shout out a team member for embodying one of our values this week. Someone will say to someone else, hey, this person was an example of Service Plus One this week. And it was really great. Oh, it's so good that you helped out on that customer or that project. You really demonstrated Service Plus One. So that's what you will probably end up documenting as a part of that, is you will come up with how can you encapsulate your vibe and your energy and your way of doing things into something that you can demonstrate and communicate. And you'll define, what does Service Plus One actually look like? Well, it's exchange in abundance, and it's these things, and it's that thing, and they get more than they expected, and we go above and beyond. But they're the kind of things that effectively, when you onboard people, you want to be hiring based on people you think can demonstrate that, and you can structure like really clever hiring questions so you can trap people into either answering correctly or answering incorrectly. You just ask these open-ended questions, but the ulterior motive is to see whether or not they'll do it. But then when you onboard, you effectively want to have it like tattooed on their forehead when you're onboarding them to live those values. That's the idea of what you want. So when you read that book, it's basically going to tell you to start documenting business processes and those kind of things. That's going to be like the main journey for you. Interestingly, when you're hiring people, for those that are looking to make sure that you hire great people, there's a little trick question that you can ask. You can ask someone, what's the worst thing one of your colleagues would say about you? And if they say something like, oh yeah, you know what, they'd probably mention that time I showed up to work stoned. It's a trick question to find out if someone's like, oh yeah, maybe that time I stole money from the boss, it's a trick question to weed out any like serious red flags. That's the first thing. That journey's been trodden many times before you and be able to help guide you through that. It's systems. And then, yes, we're going to have to get the marketing pumping. But secondly, and this is going to be most important right now, while you go through that process of replicating yourself, is energy management. And so you're going to need to become an expert on managing your own internal energy so you can perform at a really high level as an entrepreneur. For those that are parents here, I'm not a parent, but from what I understand of parenting, like you need to basically be in superhuman mode every day of the week for, 18 or 20 hours a day. And so that's what you're going to need to build for yourself. And that covers a number of these that you probably already have down pat: movement, nutrition, your body energy. But also it comes down to the cognitive and practical side of the work that you're doing during the day. That might mean that you schedule to do some of your like tech stuff for an hour or two before you go and wipe out your energy delivering during the day, because the more cognitive problem solving type stuff where you need patience to work through the technical stuff might be better done at the start of the day rather than when you're trying to do it when you're flogged out in the afternoon. There is an amazing piece of IP, which is called a performance diagnostic. This performance diagnostic, I got it from a client of mine who became an unofficial mentor called Andrew May, and he was the performance coach for the Australian rugby team or the Australian cricket team, right? So like our highest level athletes in Australia, he was their performance coach. And so the thing that I learned the most from him was that high performers need to focus on their recovery, and you would know this in the line of work that you're in. High performers need to focus on their recovery so they can be switched on when they need to be switched on. And it changed my life when I got into his work. He's got this book called Flip the Switch, but unfortunately it's now out of print. But I have the performance diagnostic from that book, and it's like a self-performance check. And that asks you things like, covers many areas of life. But one of the things that was really interesting for me was I learned, and at the time I was like, I don't know, 23, 24, and I was just like working myself to a pulp, 80 hours a week. And what I learned was my environment, including colors, scents, energy, nutrition, mindset, having quiet time, recharge time, all of these things, how they can impact business performance and how they can impact our cognitive performance as well. I did like 15 odd years of nearly 20 years of therapy because my parents had a really messy divorce, and then I basically started doing therapy. And after the first 5 years of like crying out all the childhood stuff, then I started to work out, oh wow, actually going and sitting with someone and just kind of like dumping what's active for me emotionally, just like clearing it out, is really good for my business performance. I basically used it as an entrepreneur performance tool. You don't have to go in therapy for that. I have just a note on my phone. I use Google Keep for that. I open up a Google Keep note every day, and that's my journal. I'll just use the little microphone button to talk into my phone, and it transcribes it into text. And I just use that for a mind dump, and I'll do that multiple times during the day. And it's really good for anyone who feels like they may be on the spectrum of like ADHD or autism spectrum. Doing dumps of loops that are running in your mind, emotional loops that are running in your mind that are getting in the way of you being able to actually do your important focus work. If you imagine that you've got like fog on your glasses, if you've got condensation on your glasses, and like you can still drive, but you've got to like squint and like, try and look through it. And doing that little note is my way of just kind of like, okay, wipe the glasses, and then I can keep moving. And I just do it during the day. It's like, oh, this little emotional thing that's popped up, boom, drop it into there. And if I need to go and like meditate or like bash some pillows or do something else to actually move through a trigger or move something else, I'll do that later when I need to. That may be helpful, but it all kind of ties into, being a high performing entrepreneur or a high performing human is a mix between getting shit done and productivity, which is important, but also emotional regulation and emotional management as well, because the two are intrinsically linked.